Father Murray, Mr. Donovan, Mr. Mahar, fellow teachers and staff, parents and guests of the graduates, and the reason we're all here, grads of 2017. Thanks, Matt, for that wonderful introduction. Those were very kind. Appreciate that. It also doesn't seem possible that 50 years ago, I finished my first year teaching at Loyola. After that year, I had some serious reservations about staying in the profession. Many. But it was one of my peers that convinced me I should spend one more year. I discovered an amazing thing in my second year. I had it all wrong. I thought that discipline was the foundation of good teaching. In my second year, I discovered it was motivation, especially true teaching mathematics. Before you can get students to think outside the box, they have to have a grasp of fundamentals. It always amazed me that it would take a couple of minutes to teach one of the factoring methods called difference of squares, but then it would take forever for it to become second nature. You basically had to do 100 examples. How boring. Back in the early 80s, one of my weaker students told me that he was in talent night. So I went and saw him. I was blown away. I could not believe how well this kid played the guitar. It was absolutely amazing. And I said so the next day in class. What he did, his reaction to that compliment, was to try 100 examples. It struck a chord, so to speak. But once students were well versed in these basics, the magic of math took over. It was wonderful to observe the unique and interesting solutions students had to questions. It never amazed me. Every year, somebody would come up with something a little different. It was special. Each year we would enter the Waterloo math competition, which was held across Canada. This particular year, I had a strong contingent of young math minds, and Loyola ended up being the top school in the country. One of those students, Mr. Joshua Parr, is a teacher sitting here today. After time had expired in the exam, I asked the boys to write their answers down, and we would discuss it afterwards. So the first section is very easy, the second section challenging, and the third section impossible. But the third section is where most of the marks are. So since there was a time constraint, students had to get to the third section. So after the exam, there was a question in the second section I had problems with, and I nonchalantly said to Joshua, Josh, there were some interesting questions in section 2. What did you think of number 17? The one I couldn't get. Joshua goes, sir, that was absurdly simple and explained. Very humbling. I didn't have the nerve to tell him I didn't get it. Josh, by the way, had the top mark in Canada. This was a common occurrence over the years. Not that I didn't get it, but the ingenuity and insight displayed by these young men. But you guys kept us young and energized. I always referred to it as the enthusiasm of youth. It was a waste of time to go into your class and talk gloom and doom. You weren't interested in all that was bad in the world. Your eyes were on the future and what your destiny held. That enthusiasm is contagious. It affects us all. It was wonderful. I remember, as Matt mentioned, that trip to Czechoslovakia. Mr. Lefebvre was on that trip. He today carries on that tradition. One of his buddies was Peter Ferguson, a superb athlete. Pete and myself were standing on the sidelines of the largest outdoor stadium in the world. And I look at him and I go, Fergie, me and you, there and back, other side. He goes, Coach, you don't stand a chance. I point to something over there. While he's looking, I take off. He catches me at the other side, but it was a little bit of snow, and I might have pushed off him a bit and got another lead back and beat him. When he got to the sideline, I said, Fergie, age and deception will always outdo youth and enthusiasm. We both knew it was no contest. Today is no different. You all have the same hopes and aspirations that the grads of the last 50 years did. One of my wishes I have for you in the years ahead is that you never lose this enthusiasm, that you always look at life as a grand adventure. Hopefully, you'll never become complacent with the status quo, but believe that you can make a difference. The amazing thing is, you can. In the last edition of Loyola Today, which is the alumni newsletter, Mr. Paul Donovan noted that we can quantify certain goals the school has, but other goals, such as being committed to justice, are much harder to measure. In fact, he stated the success of the school can only be measured by our alumni. As Matt stated, my position at the school for the last 14 years was alumni director. It was a tough job organizing beer bashes and golf tournaments. But as a matter of fact, it was the best job, because I was able to reconnect with former students that I had coached and I had taught. And lo and behold, they still have the same zest for life and the same concern for others. It's interesting that one of the things the Alumni Association does, it offered a number of CSP activities that alumni could get involved in. And it was amazing how no matter what we did, barbecue at Labra House, NDG food drive, the response was overwhelming. Now, I don't know why this surprises me, because after all our motto is men and women for others. I guess we sometimes get caught up in marks and place a heavy emphasis in judging success on these results. I see it quite differently after 14 years with alumni. Sure, it's important to have a great job and be a person of influence. But I think it's so much more important just to be a good person. To be someone who cares for others. Too many bad things happen to innocent people when greed rears its ugly head. The happiest people I know are caring and giving and willing to share their lives with their friends and their families. You guys have forged some wonderful friendships in your years at Loyola. Keep in touch as the years go on. Build on those relationships, and your lives will have great meaning. Thinking back on the past 51 years, there is one piece of advice I'll pass on, only one. Find a job you love. I had a magical ride. I was not only blessed with great students, but I worked with a wonderful team. Those of you who were fortunate enough to have Mr. Sanders in your math class know a little bit about his sense of humor. Every now and then he would dig up a math question and put it on my desk, and under it there would always be 2 words: have fun. One time he found a trig identity from the Dark Ages, but mistakenly substituted cotangent for tangent. After 3 hours of trying to solve it, I crawled over to his desk and said, "Master, I give up." He looked at the question and said, "Who put the cotangent function in there?" He still has the scars. You know, we had a wonderful time. We backed each other. We never counted the minutes. It was all the intangibles that made the job wonderful. So how do you find this magical job? Well, you definitely will go into the profession for which you're being trained. My hope is that when you do that and you have a job, that it appeals to you, and you like it, and you get meaning out of it. But if it doesn't, leave it. Speak to your family and friends. Find something that is fulfilling. But once you're there, develop a strong work ethic. Bring your talents to the table and be a contributing employee. It's much too easy in life to belittle and criticize policies. It takes courage and determination to step up to the plate and strive for the betterment of all. My great friend, Kelly Burke, once said, "In this world, there are givers and there are takers." I suggest to you that you be a giver. After all, this has been part of your training. It will give you fulfillment, friendships, and contentment. In closing, I would like to quote from my favorite artist, Bob Dylan. My wife's cringing in the back. He can't sing. May you always do for others and let others do for you. Climb that ladder to the stars, rung by rung. And may you always be forever young. God bless.